Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. I had a question a while ago about the huge stack of books that is back over here, but I actually took it and put it right next to me on my desk. I can hear my dog snoring. It's kind of funny. And I'm gonna go through some of the books in that, and it's a very large pile I have over here, and hopefully this is interesting. And as I've talked about in one of my other videos, and somebody did ask me, like, what would I do if I didn't work all the time? Like, I do like reading and I do like learning. I always said that if money were no object, I would also just take a bunch of classes at a university and just do that forever. But unfortunately, those cost money. So that sucks. Okay. I've already showed this book a couple times. Brene Brown. She's got TED Talks and stuff. She's very into, like, this vulnerability concept and how important that is in relationships. But the thing I really like about this book, yeah, and it's my book club book through work, and it's great, but it lists all the different emotions, and it's something like 100 of them or something like that. And the reason why I find this book so helpful is because if you're somebody who struggles with emotional regulation, like me, I'm going to admit that because that's true. It helps you identify them, and if you're able to identify them and sort of logic your way through them or rationalize them, I find that it's helpful in learning to regulate them. So that's why I've really enjoyed this book. I'm gonna try to not be loud as I set these over here. Okay, this book I just casually saw on Amazon, Healing Your Inner Child First. I'm really not that far into this book. It gets very yoga-y, I guess, crunchy, whatever these words are that people use, like very natural and into the chakras and the energies. And I know people are into this, and it's like a different form of spirituality, but it's a little bit interesting for me. I'm not really sure what to do with it, like how much I buy into it, kind of examining that myself. But, I mean, yeah, the point of this is there are certain issues that you're going to continue having throughout your life if you had unmet needs in childhood, and that's why I find this book kind of useful and interesting, even though it's sort of losing me here at the beginning. Alright, this book, Controlling People, whoever this is by, I found this in my friend's attic, and I was like, hey, this book looks interesting, and she's like, I read it 10 years ago, you can have it. And I'm not very far in this book either, but it is super interesting because it basically starts off by talking about people who can appear very kind, nice, benevolent, like, productive members of society in public, but within the walls of their own home, they're very, like, domineering, but in a negative way, like very vindictive and controlling, yes, as the book is called. And it's sort of like, what is the disconnect between the way that people act in public and the way that people act in private in their own homes? So that's why I find this book pretty interesting, but I'm not very far in it. Well, like most of my books, as I've talked about, I don't really finish reading books. I'm pretty bad at that, so I just kind of skim and read random stuff in each of these. Stronger Than BPD. Okay, because I thought I had BPD. You know, I'm not even going to pretend to know whether I do or not. It doesn't matter. Point is, emotional dysregulation is a hallmark of that, and I think that's what's going on half the time. So either way, maybe it's still useful. But about this book, when I thought I had BPD, whatever, okay, and it talks about emotional regulation techniques, which is why I find this one cool, but I haven't looked at this in a while. On the same topic of BPD, Stop Walking on Eggshells. This is the most famous BPD book out there, I think. I'm pretty sure, and there are a couple different editions of it. But the thing I really like about this book that people don't do, but you should do, is if you ever meet somebody who you think has BPD, don't tell them. And it says that very specifically in this book. So that was one takeaway, and just kind of gives you techniques for dealing with other people that you think have BPD, which, if you yourself think you have BPD, is actually a pretty interesting read from that perspective as well. So, I don't know. I need to go through and read this again. I really hate how brains just forget information, so I just keep trying to reread the same books. The Love Languages book. I bought this when I was in Seattle, I think, in some random bookshop. I'm a pretty big fan of the love languages. My love language number 1 is quality time. I don't remember the rest of the orders, but gift giving is pretty low, even though I like to give other people gifts, so it's kind of weird. And I like acts of service, but probably not as much as my parents do. But yeah, I like quality time. Anyway, whatever. There, you can go take the quiz online. But this book is interesting because it breaks down each of these and gives different examples for how people who have different love languages then relate to and talk to each other. So it's been interesting, but I'm not very far in this one either. I started reading this when I was in Seattle in like February, and yeah, haven't got too far. Okay. I revisited this book. Congratulations to this book for being one of the only books I've ever read in its entirety in my life, which I read in its entirety back in 2016. But I love this book so much because this book is actually the first time I really heard about Tinder, which it's like, yes, people know what Tinder is, but they describe why Tinder's so engaging, and it's like the game-like element, and it's sort of got that like casino vibe of the random, you don't know what's going to happen next when you swipe, and that's why it's so appealing. And it goes into talking about how online dating is changing things and all the ways that modern dating has changed and how that has affected romance. So I love this book. Really, I would highly recommend it, even though I don't remember what that well. But because this guy's a comedian, it's like also very funny. So it's like factual and funny. So great. Really, so great. Okay. One of the rare books I actually bought at a bookstore and not on Amazon for cheaper. Your Family Revealed, psychology book. Yeah, so as you're going to see, most of these are psychology books. So what is my hobby? Psychology. Okay, and this one, I can't remember if I said this in a video or if I've just gone around quoting this random statistic. 96% of families are considered dysfunctional. As my one friend likes to say, her family puts the fun in dysfunctional. And yeah, you can look at it that way if you want to silver lining it, so to speak. But this book talks about, and I bought this from Barnes & Noble, by the way, because I started reading it and I really liked it. This book talks about family systems, which there are also people on YouTube who talk about this too, and I like to listen to those YouTube videos as well. Aside from financial YouTube, I also listen to psychological YouTube, and I like learning about family systems and just the way that the different relationships in the family, like in all kinds of families, natural families, blended families, different ages, like all the different roles that people have and the certain dynamics and the way that functional and dysfunctional dynamics can exist and coexist together. Like I think there's an example of like a dysfunctional alcoholic mom in here and how much of the slack the dad has to pick up and step into that mother role almost. So I don't know, it's interesting, but I'm further in that book than a lot of books, but yeah, I like that one. This book, okay, CBT, I've taken a DBT class, but CBT don't know as much about, so I'm reading a book on it, even though I'm also not that far. I do have a bookmark, not that far with this one either, but I like this book because it talks about a guy who tries to teach people CBT and then his own struggles with mental health and the things that he needed to start doing in order to, like, kind of when CBT wasn't enough, like what did he start doing, which is kind of where I'm at now. I don't know the answer yet, but well, and it's also like CBT focuses more on just like getting yourself to feel better in the moment rather than working through trauma, right? Like trauma work is another thing that people will do. But this book I found in one of those little free book libraries where people just stick books in there. And so I took this one and yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, next. I just found this book in my room. It's old, but it's so interesting, and I've skimmed it a little bit, and one of the things that it talks about is how women who are housewives actually sometimes like being housewives because they have a lot of autonomy over their schedule, and then now we have so many great, what are those things called, like appliances, you know, that make housework simplified, like vacuum cleaners and dishwashers and stuff, and how it's like, yes, you don't necessarily get paid for working inside the house, but it is still considered a job, and, you know, society has changed a lot, obviously, society, so, like, the way that people get paid now versus then is different, but this is written, like, some time ago. I think this is from, like, the 70s or the 80s, 1992, okay, JK. That's from when I was, like, born almost. Yeah, but, I mean, I grew up seeing traditional gender roles, so I get it. But, yeah, then there's also a part, I didn't read this part as much, that talks about, like, women not going into STEM jobs and examining whether that's actually a gender thing or whether it's a conditioning thing, but I don't remember what exactly the outcome was. It was just, like, there was some study they were actually doing on that, and I know that continues to be an issue. All right, one of the best books of all time, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm also not done reading yet. Yeah, I should really start doing audiobooks or something, but I think this book is great because what it does is it's sort of like debunking the whole victim mentality around not having money. I'm going to put it that way. And I know it's like, well, that's such a, privileged person thing to say. Maybe it is. But I mean, what this book teaches is that it is the thing that a lot of financial people will teach you, which is that having money has nothing to do with being smart, which actually there are a lot of videos on YouTube that talk about this too. It has to do with a very specific set of behaviors. It has to do with investing, and it has to do with his big thing that he talks about at the beginning of this book, so that's what I've read, is that acquiring assets is very important to amassing wealth. What is an asset? He says the difference between rich people and the difference between poor people is that poor people will acquire things that they think are assets that really aren't, versus rich people will acquire things that are actually assets. What's an asset? Anything that returns money, right? So this can be investments, this can be rental properties, primarily those kinds of things. So yeah, that's essentially what that teaches you, and that like managing people is one of the things that allows you to get more money and so on and so forth. And it's because, quite frankly, most people don't want to do it. So what's a way to get money? Do things most people don't want to do, including learning how to manage your money. Does anybody think financial literacy sounds like a fun hobby? Besides me? Probably not. So yeah, being boring is how you become rich. That's what that sounds like to me. And not spending your money on stupid crap, which is easier said than done when you live in a consumer society. Okay, finally, this book. Oh wait, I didn't tell you where I got this book from. I also got this book in Seattle. Wait, no I didn't. I got it in Portland in a gift shop. So what do I do on vacation? Buy books because it makes me happy. And I leave the house and then I accidentally buy things, which is why I try not to leave the house because I have enough books in my room. Okay, this one, Set Boundaries and Find Peace. Why do I have this book? Because one of my BFFs was going to therapy and told me that her therapist recommended that she read this book in order to improve her relationship with her mom. And the actual really funny thing about this friend is that she used to make fun of me for reading psychology articles, and I don't think about going to a therapist necessarily, but she was just like, oh, you're one of these people, right? And then what does she do? She gets into this stuff herself and then sends me this kind of book. So honestly, like, that kind of makes me happy. Like, actually very happy. But this book is super cool. And, one of the things that people maybe do or don't understand, depending on who you are, is that your boundaries come from your parents. Like, what you learn is an appropriate boundary or not is something that you subconsciously learn from a very young age. And as you get older, you may realize that these boundaries that you've developed, consciously or subconsciously, mostly subconsciously, maybe are not healthy, and then you can consciously change your boundaries in a direction that better serves you and your emotional and mental well-being. And that's what this book talks about, is like how to do that, and also recognizing unhealthy boundaries so that you can work to rectify them. So that's everything that I have for my current book list. I have a lot of other books, and yeah, I've been switching between reading all of these. Mostly my book club book I've been reading, which good for me. It may be like one of the only books I read in its entirety in a while, because that's how it is. One of my friends told me that once she started taking ADHD meds that she could finally finish reading books, and like honestly, I was pretty jealous. Maybe that's one of my next goals, is like read books in their entirety rather than just like sporadically reading them. I have no idea if like taking ADHD meds actually makes you do that. If it does, that'd be cool. Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have. I hope that was interesting. Gave you some little highlight summary overviews of all the books that I read. And yeah. So as I said, I'm going on a little mini vacation again. I guess it's a vacation kind of. Going to see people I haven't seen, making my rounds. So I'll be away-ish and probably not doing any of this stuff until sometime next week. But one thing I would like to conclude with is thank you very much for your continued support of my channel. Anybody who watches these videos, especially those who watch them through their entirety. And I have a very exciting announcement to make, which is that I got my first payout from YouTube. It wasn't that much money. It was like $100. And how long did it take me to make $100? 3 months. So don't quit your day job, obviously. And I make more money in a shift at the restaurant most of the time. So yeah, it's not really like in terms of finances, it's a big feat. But in terms of what it represents and the fact that this hobby has turned into something that maybe eventually could someday be more and be like actually a side gig, I just find that very motivating and encouraging. And I'm very appreciative to all you in the audience who make that possible for me because it's it's really cool. Like it's exciting and I never really knew that I would be able to do something like this. So it makes me feel really good about myself, and I'm happy that this content is interesting and it's enjoyable to people. So, really, I just want to express my thanks. I'm trying to think of more ways for user engagement aside from trying to respond to you directly in my videos and all the comments you leave me. I have thought about live streaming, kind of low key scared of that, if I'm being honest, but probably something I could try. And I don't know. I'm not really sure what else, but if you have any suggestions, I did think about doing like a Michaela meet and greet kind of thing, but I feel like that could go awry pretty quickly as well. So, I don't know. If you have suggestions, please let me know below. Other than that, I guess until next week, and I hope you enjoyed this. Alright, thank you everybody, and have a nice weekend. Bye.